I'm going to introduce Mark Irwin. And Mark's from the Southern Trust. In fact, I've known Mark for quite a while over a range of jobs and roles. And he's always been a great supporter of our lunchtime seminars, and it's great that he's back today again. So Mark is going to demonstrate an innovative approach to service delivery for children with disabilities during the COVID pandemic, when infection rates were really high. So Mark, I'm going to share your slides for you, and I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alison. I suppose, as you say, I've had lots of hats and coats on over the years, and before I was in social work, I was a painter, I was a cleaner, I worked for a mechanic for a while, I was a retail manager for 6 years, and I'm a firm believer that all that stuff and all those skills and knowledge are all transferable, and you can always put those things to use, you know, somewhere else. And as you said, Alison, I'm a great supporter of the lunchtime seminars, and the last time I was here, I delighted, confused, and bored people in equal measure with my knowledge of electronic 70s and 80s music. And actually my boss is here Liam today, rang me before and says, you know, please let me know if you have any surprises in the presentation, like cars or anything. And yes, actually I do. So whilst most of this presentation will be chalk and talk, for the first few slides, I'm encouraging participation. So I think, Alison, if people put their hand up via the electronic means, if they're able to answer the question. Now, if we'd been doing this in person, there would have been Freddo's as prize, because the doctors told me I'm going to have to cut down on that stuff. But unfortunately, there's no prizes today. There's just the glory in knowing that you know it. So if you want to move on to the next slide there, Alison. So can anybody tell me, now, and don't say a car, can anybody tell me what this is? And I've made it easy. No, no, right. Okay, the interactive bit's going really well here. Right, well, I did make it easy. On the number plate, you maybe see Simca 1100 Ti. Okay, so this was in essence the first hot hatchback. Now, if anybody had got it, I was going to ask them what the horsepower and the top speed was, but I think that's a wee bit null and void at this stage. So this was an important car because this was the first time that sort of there was a hot hatchback. So an ordinary car made a wee bit sportier. So if you want to go to the next one then, Alison. Now this should be getting easier. Does anybody know what this is? Oh, it's Kieran.
It's a Renault 5.
Yeah, there's lots of different Renault 5s, Kieran.
It's a black Renault 5.
No, you're nearly there, but no, this is the
a black Renault 5 with a couple of wee red stripes.
Right, Philistine. But anyway, Kieran, this is a Renault 5 Gordini, and Gordini was an amazing French tuner. But anyway, that's sort of beside the point. This came out in 1976, 2 months before the next car. Now, if nobody gets the next car, I think I'm going to give up. Fiona, did you want to say something, Fiona Collison?
No, I've just seen my hands up. I haven't got a clue.
Okay, it's a black car with red stripes.
Yeah, I got that, but
okay. Okay, Alison, if you want to move on to the next slide.
Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it. If everyone else can.
It's a Vauxhall Golf or Volkswagen Golf GTI. It's probably around the early 80s, I would say.
Well done, Alison Kerwin. Yep. Yes, it's the Mark I Golf GTI. So this is widely regarded as the first car that was seen as a hot hatchback. So even though it had been done before, this was sort of the one that, you know, made a great iconic one. it sort of could basically do everything. So it was your shopping car, you know, but it could go fast. It was fun. It looked cool. Yuppies sort of liked them as well. And the basic ingredients to this weren't a mystery. You know, it wasn't rocket science. But it basically took the Golf to capture the public imagination to this idea of it being a hot hatchback. So it was a very simple idea, and it was very well executed, and it sort of captured the public imagination. So if you want to move on to the next one then, Alison. So it really was about taking the ordinary and turning it into extraordinary. So this is all the iteration. So it was such a good idea, they just kept doing it. So this is the Mark 1 Golf right up to the Mark 7. There's actually now a Mark 8 Golf, but it's not in the picture. I'm sure you're all very, very disappointed. If you want to move on to the next one, Alison. So imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So this idea was a very simple idea, but it was very good, and people started copying it. So the ones you maybe do remember, recognize if you're old enough, is the Ford XR3i in the front and the 205 GTI. But basically all of the manufacturers did this. So they thought that this was, you know, a great, and if something's inherently right, you know, people will do it. So the car companies aren't stupid. They will only invest in something, you know, if it's going to make the money and it works. Okay, if you want to move on to the next one, Alison. Now, initially, this was just going to be a gratuitous shot of my 3 cars. But then I thought, no, actually, I could use this in a really sort of meaningful way. So I could. Now, you're probably thinking, why do you take all that time to clean those cars and didn't clean the moss? But look, that's another study, and that's a psychological thing. So we'll not sort of go there. But on the left here, you have my 1983 Mark 1 Golf GTI. On the right, you have the Mark 2 1989 Golf GTI 16 valve, which is probably the greatest hot hatchback ever. But what's the car in the middle, and why is that important?
It's probably the only one that runs, Mark.
Gareth, you are also a Philistine. No, that's not the right answer, but I like your style. Anybody else want to hazard a guess?
Well, apart from being another Volkswagen, is she like a Mark II or anything as well?
No, there's a Mark 7.5.
Is it a hybrid? Mark, is it? It's only because I know. Is it a hybrid? Is that got anything?
You're getting, because you've seen me in my hybrid, you see, Liz.
You see, that's I'm cheating a little bit.
Yeah. No, this is actually a fully electric Golf. So this is the evolution of this. So I haven't gone totally mad. Think of this idea of starting with something simple and then building on it. So this was the whole this is like the evolution of this idea. So it's fast, it's roomy, it's economical, it's environmentally friendly. It's not a Volkswagen diesel, so obviously it's very good. So it's really the complete car. And you're probably thinking, what on earth has this got to do with services with a disability? But it's actually got a lot to do about it. So what I want you to do is think back now to last March 2020 and last April, and not with the benefits of hindsight, where we're all sitting now and we're a bit more comfortable. Think back to what it was actually like then and what we were all thinking. So if you want to move on to the next slide, Alison. And I suppose the thing is, if you do think back honestly, I do think that it was a really scary time, both professionally and personally as well. We didn't know really much about this virus. We didn't know what was going to happen. Where people within our service who quite understandably were saying, look, just close everything down. This is too dangerous. It's too unknown. Let's just stop doing everything. So there was genuine fear and uncertainty. But again, going back to one of my earlier points, it's that bit about playing to your strengths. And obviously to play to your strengths, you need to know your weaknesses as well. And again, one of the strengths we have is within the management team. And we had a relatively new head of service, Elaine, but had been one of my colleagues, certainly was very, very capable, but we had a good management team with 3 really solid social work teams. We had a good short breaks fostering team, the community access team, transition team, and we 3 residential units. We also had a well-established infection control team. And again, when I think back, whenever we were doing mandatory training, maybe 5 years before that, I remember people laughing in the training at them, telling us how to wash our hands properly. But really, they were right. They were way ahead of the game, in terms of it. So with a highly skilled and experienced workforce, and I suppose at that time, that bit about not forgetting the voice of the service user was critical. And we had done quite a bit of research within the service for short breaks. We'd done work with parents and PPI stuff. And I suppose the value of short breaks and services was without question. And I suppose we knew that some people basically weren't going to survive, So Alison, if you want to go on to the next one. So the why, the how, and the what, just to condense this, we sort of really felt at this time, we were the last person standing, health and social care, was the bank of last resort because most of the other stuff closed, So what we did, we created a very extensive family support initiative. First of all, with bespoke sort of one-to-one packages. And we then moved on then to summer schemes beyond that. And we've sort of built up in it. So we built on the experience. We also shared the learning. There was very much an action research approach. Because this literally was so new, nobody in our lifetime had done this or had to do it. So we were learning basically as we went. But ultimately, there was positive outcomes for the families. And the reason we know that is that we did a really extensive evaluation of this. And I have some of those later on. So we knew that this basically worked and made, a difference. If you want to move on to the next one then, Alison. So these were some of the themes that came out of the issue. So we did a really extensive evaluation after we'd done the bespoke one-to-one packages and then the summer scheme stuff. So there was 94 issues reported by parents. So these were the main themes. Now, some of these apply equally to the parents as well as the children. Mental health and stress was the biggie. COVID really, really put the pressure on people. And as I say, there was mental health deterioration in the young people, but there was also mental health deterioration in the carers. So, for example, young people with autism who didn't have a learning disability were really adversely affected by this because they knew what was going on. A child with a very profound learning disability may not have known the full ramifications, of COVID and what it meant and how scary it actually was. The social isolation. So take yourself back. Lockdown, you weren't allowed to go anywhere. You weren't allowed to do anything. You weren't allowed to see grandparents, so that was a huge change for many of these families who relied on some of those support systems to help them cope. Challenging behavior of children escalated. And again, we have the evidence of that did get worse during COVID. And again, the anxiety and fear applies equally to parents, and carers. There was frustration, there was anger, there was distress. I know the social workers were ringing the families and, people were getting it really tough. There was a lack of physical activity. So for a lot of the children we work with, they need that physical activity to keep themselves regulated. They need to be going out to parks. They need to be doing stuff. And that simply wasn't available to them. There was also then the lack of structure and sleep because the schools weren't on. The self-harming behaviors of children escalated, got worse. Depression and mood. And again, this one is both for parents, carers, and children. Also got worse. There was a lot of attention-seeking behaviours. So, children got very, very needy, even more needy to their parents. There was the support issues I've talked about, because they didn't have those sort of soft support that they would have had previously. There was also the whole thing of COVID stress, I suppose, as well, and the worry about getting COVID, and what that might mean. And, that was a huge, because, for a parent with a child with disability, you're thinking, well, if I get COVID and I have to go to hospital, what's going to happen to my child? And a lot of our parents are single parents, and you're saying, well, you can't have grandparents, you can't have this help. Most services have closed. That was really, really worrying for people at the time. And again, we're not quite sure why this last one happened, but we've documented evidence that it did. For those children with epilepsy, there was increased seizures activity. And again, we're not sure why, but that is something that definitely came out of it. Okay, Alison, we'll go to the next one. So we very much took a very holistic, wide approach to this. So whilst it was bespoke one-to-one packages initially, where possible, we did include siblings, and that's what this photograph is here. This is in one of our projects, Goal Line in Portadown. So these are two siblings who took place in that initial phase. And that was important too, because siblings were being impacted, as well. Okay, I've gone on to the next one, Alison, thanks. I suppose our big worry was that children were going to come into care, that basically this was going to become intolerable, and, people just basically couldn't go on. We had done a scoping exercise well before this for age of care children. So, we had about 20 children on that list who we thought were at risk of coming into care. What actually happened was interesting. We actually ended up having to help 30 children with the one-to-one bespoke packages, but not all of them were on the age of care list. So we had quite a few children where we were really surprised that they ended up, having to need the care. Some of them then actually having to go into care as well. The special schools and public authority facilities basically closed. And I say those were huge supports. I know education don't like to think of themselves as respite because it is education, and we get that. But for families, it is respite. So from 8 in the morning to maybe 3, 4 in the afternoon, that is a break from their child and their caring duties. That was no longer open to them. And so that impact of caring for a child with a disability as well, basically behaviours became uncontrollable for some of the children. So there was a risk of significant harm for some of these children. So, this was really serious stuff. So initially, the idea was to stop children coming into care. But as we went on, then we want to go further with the learning, and we want to actually develop some of the stuff that we learned and did, out of this. Okay, Alison. So we sort of thought, this particular one was a bit like running, towards the fire, as everybody else was sort of running away. But we did take ideas from parents of care, we took ideas from children, from trust staff, and from the voluntary sector staff, as well. And I think having an integrated health and social care system also helped us. So we had really good links with allied health professionals, ID CAMs, community children's nurses, autism services, and they all helped us with programs and advice and, helping to do assessments and how would the children cope in these environments, what sort of things should we be doing. But again, if you think back to March, April last year, big issues with PPE and getting PPE. I don't know if you remember at the start, the supermarkets were doing like the happy hour from like 7:30 in the morning. for healthcare staff. So I was going down to Sainsbury's and Tesco's at 7:30 in the morning to buy hand sanitizer and wipes, as much as they would allow you to buy it, and then bringing that to the voluntary groups that were running a lot of this stuff for us. So it was certainly, you know, a job of work. It was very resource intensive, you know, and focused on those with the greatest need. So that was very much a new direction of travel for us, you know, this idea of a one-to-one service. So whilst we would have done that in the past, it would have been very much very individual circumstances, and quite often as a last resort as well. Whereas now it became the new norm. You know, it really was important. And then we'd got a lockdown letter so parents and carers could take children out. So we did that. And we also did that for some of the voluntary groups as well, because they were being stopped by the police and asked where they were going and what they were doing. So they were out and about sort of, you know, helping us, you know, as well. Okay, do you want to go next one? And I suppose it was really efficient because we were using all of our existing resources. We used our own staff in relation to the voluntary sector. The system was basically very simple as well. Social worker did an up-to-date assessment. The senior social worker had to okay it, and then they came directly to me, and I said yeah or nay. But to be fair to the quality of the assessments, I don't think there were any cases where I was saying no, because, you know, people knew the resource was very precious. They knew it wasn't a case of just firing in a pile of referrals, you know. So we did work a lot smarter, I suppose, and a lot quicker as well. And again, if you think about it, you know, it's very like, you know, what I was sort of saying before. We reviewed it and monitored in the managers meeting as well, and that met much more frequently. So there was good governance. So we had all the senior social workers in that meeting. So we were checking, look, is this working? Is it meeting the needs within the team? And so we were getting much more frequent updates than that. We also involved the Parents Forum, the PPI team as well. I chair the PPI Forum, so that was a handy inroad for me. And as I say, the essential ingredients this weren't groundbreaking, you know, but putting them together in a pandemic was a completely new way of working. So if you think back to the hot hatchback analogy, you know, putting a big engine in a small car or whatever wasn't exactly new, but doing it all together in the one package in the way that they did, certainly was, you know. Okay, go on to the next one, Alison. And again, I don't want to say I copied Boris Johnson or Donald Trump, because I certainly wouldn't be copying them. But one thing watching those guys was, and you saw it very clearly, a very simple, clear message grabs people and gets them on board. And we did that with the staff, and we did it with the voluntary sector. So the message was, right, we want to stop children coming into care. We're going to focus only on those with priority need. And above all else, it has to be done safely, and it has to be a quality product. It has to be quality care. So it's not warehousing. It's not taking them somewhere for the sake of taking them. It has to be meaningful, and it has to be developmental, you know, for them. And I say 30 children availed of it initially. We had 3 that came into full-time care, and then subsequently returned home. The evaluations were universally positive. The only sort of negative stuff we got was people saying, I wish there was more of it. I wish it was closer to my home. The times don't really suit me, you know. And again, listen, we were working with a very scarce resource, so there was only, you know, sort of so much we could do. And again, another reason this worked, I suppose, was communication. We communicated constantly with our staff, with the families, and with the voluntary sector as well. And I know, I know that's a very simple thing and it comes up in every SAI or inquiry. But there's a reason it comes up in every SAI inquiry. When you don't do it, or you don't do it right, or you don't do it well, it will be an issue. But that's one of the reasons, thankfully, why this worked. There was a clear impact in improving the mental health of parents, carers, and children. And again, we saw that, the evaluations. There was an important socialization element of this for the children as well. So in the initial phase, they were meeting other people, at least in terms of the staff. Later on, during the summer schemes, they were meeting other children. The self-esteem of children and their confidence also improved as well. And it had a really positive impact on our voluntary sector partners as well. And it sort of validated them as being important. They really knew they were doing something important. They knew they were doing something special. They knew they were making a difference. I always remember years ago, was a friend in a private company was telling me I was wasting my time doing this social work, and that if I took my skills and stuff off to them, that, I could go places and, make a lot of money. And I remember saying to him, well, that's the difference. Suppose your organization's about making money. My organization's about making a difference. Now, of course, he laughed at me, but I did say that in all sincerity to him, and I still believe that. Otherwise, we wouldn't all be here, trying to do that stuff. So it had a very profound effect on the voluntary sector. And I think there was a great deal of pride at the time, and there's still a great feeling of pride now among them as well. Okay, Alison. I suppose it's tackled that silo mentality within the trust, because we were moving people left, right, and centre. We were going where the need was. And I suppose it showed some of the other teams and directorates, what actually was possible, as well. So it was very fluid. It was very flexible, eclectic, and I suppose anybody that knows me, that's the way I like to work. So, I'll put those skills to good use. And it was shared at senior management level. And, that was really good. There was real buy-in right up through the management structure. So this went right to the top, and that was important, as well. There was certainly better outcomes for children and families. It was much financially cheaper than a care admission, if you want to be really clinical and cold about it, which runs from a few £100s a week till thousands to tens of thousands. And again, this bit was important for me. It kept voluntary sector staff in employment, because, we had worked with these people for years. We'd built up good relations with them. We didn't want them to go to wall. And we've seen that now in some other sectors, whereby people who've been laid off or who weren't able to work haven't went back to that place of work. They went and done something else. We certainly didn't want that within the voluntary sector. As I said before, it's reduced bureaucracy. It was much more responsive. The whole getting a place was much simpler and quicker. And again, now the community groups are approaching us. Their newfound confidence, suppose they're thinking like, why don't we do this? This here is a really good idea. Let's do this. Okay, Alison. Yeah. So with 2 young people who were discharged from long-term stays in mental health facilities during this. Now, the one-to-one packages that we were able to offer, because we had it all set up, were like a prime factor in that. They were a really important part of making that work, and making the sort of whole discharge process, be viable. And neither of those people had to be subsequently readmitted. Thankfully, there was 3 children that did come into care, returned home following that care, so we were able to get them back. And again, the spread of this has been sort of up and down and outwards. I always joke with Liam, my boss, that I'm going to take over the world, but I'm a great believer in advocating these things and spreading the news, and not being afraid to sort of shout it from the rooftops. And we did a website for COVID during that. We did the summer activities. And again, I suppose this is the thing we're very proud of. We were highly commended in the HSJ Value Awards on the 2nd of September over in Manchester for the specialist service sort of redesign category. So we were the only sort of team service from Northern Ireland to win something. And I think we were the only social care one as well. And I even had to buy a suit for it as well. And one of my colleagues had lots of suits, and somebody says, why don't you get one off him? But when you see the photograph next, you realize why I didn't get the suit off him. If you want to go on that photograph, Alison. So this is us at the HSJ Awards. The chap on the left obviously is my colleague, and you can see why he didn't wear his suit. But, it was funny doing that, because initially when we got the invite and we looked at how much it was going to cost, Elaine and I said, oh, that'll buy us a summer scheme. There's no point in us doing that. So we declined it. And then they came back to us and they offered us a discount. And said, if you only send a few people over. So, we were doing it in charitable funds and cheap flights and things and whatever, which I say was in stark contrast, I have to say, to our clinical colleagues, but maybe they've got it right, or there's somewhere, in between. If you want to go on to the next one, Alison. So this is the views of some of the children, that were able to articulate their views. And the things they like were spending time with others, after being in lockdown. Simple things like baking cupcakes, cracked their own eggs. It was good crack. They loved it. And again, George, the staff's dog, that came to visit every day. Again, we simple things, but important. Being able to play in the play park and looking after George, the dog, he was so good. These wee things really made a difference. And again, during the summer schemes then, hanging out, with my friends. Want to go to the next one then, Alison? And this is the experience of parents and carers. And, this first one I think is really sobering, I think, for all of us, because what I thought when I first of all saw that, I thought, well, what was happening when she wasn't, or he or she wasn't getting the break? Give them a chance to go to bed and get a couple hours sleep because they're working nights. What were they doing before during lockdown when their kids were dysregulated and maybe up at night? And the next one, again, under severe pressure, the epilepsy had took over their lives. It's causing particular serious issues with the parents' mental health as well. And they really described this as being a lifeline for them. It allowed them to interact with other people other than family members, improve their mental health, and it allowed family respite. One person said, look, we were at breaking point. The impact of this was awful on us. So I suppose it validated what we were trying to do, I suppose. And this bit at the end, again, the time to focus on the other child. So the impact on siblings as well, who maybe didn't, have a disability, was significant as well. Okay, Alison, do you want to go on to the next one? And I just put this quote in its entirety because, again, this one here, when I first read it again as well, I just thought, my goodness, So this was obviously a trust employee. So due to COVID and homeschooling, they had to be downgraded at work because they'd failed goals. That made them very anxious. They were the only breadwinner in their home. She was also the carer for her husband, who had mental health issues, post-traumatic stress disorder. Also a carer for the son due to his autism and learning difficulties, was a big strain on them mentally. So they had to be referred to occupational health at the trust where they worked. So when the social worker said the YMCA's, YMCA in Lurgan, could provide them with summer care, they were elated and relieved, and staff were amazing with them. So like my goodness, how good is it to be able to do something like that when you see somebody was under, so much pressure? And something that's relatively simple, but again, if it's done well, can make that difference. Okay, Alison, do you want to go on to the next one? Again, this was the provider. So this was our voluntary sector colleagues. And again, I say this was very good for them. So it's a part-time member that benefited from collaboration, they gained experience working with sensory needs, that had received a training for that previously, but felt it was really good to be able to put it in practice. It was also very rewarding to be able to give the young people some routine and normality during lockdown. And there was great improved cooperation between the YMCA, the Children with Disabilities team, and social workers. There really was a sense, it wasn't like David Cameron's, we're all in this together. This really was, we were all in it together. We were all in the same team. We were all trying to work, towards the same goal, And I suppose the voluntary sector staff said there was new challenges for us to be on top of our game as well. And my goodness, they certainly were. They really rose to the occasion. They were amazing. Okay, if you want to go on to the next one, Alison, I think it's the video. And I suppose this, every time I see this, it still gives me goosebumps. But if you
Just
can
bear with me one wee tick.
So this is Shelley, whose son Nathan was able to utilize some of the bespoke activities at the start.
Can you see it? Yeah.
Hello, I just want to share with you all how the bespoke package benefited us. Truly, at our darkest days in lockdown, my son was struggling so much that he put his head through his brick wall. The package we received was tailored towards Nathan. His carer was even involved, Dominic, and that gave Nathan such a sense of security. We had time to look after ourselves then and look after our daughter and concentrate on her for a couple of hours a few times a week. Nathan's behaviour changed drastically, and I'll never forget how relieved we were to know that there was someone out there trying to help our family when we weren't even allowed to see family members, for help. I am eternally grateful to everyone involved. I will never forget how much hope it gave me, and just thank you so much.
Okay, so that was Shelley. It was very kind of her, to do that video for us. But again, you do get some insight into what it was like for people, and I think it's really important to never, forget that. But I suppose you don't get something for nothing. There's a cost to everything. This was mentally and physically draining for the workforce, including the voluntary sector, and the real need for management to offer proactive support, to staff as well. It was also really unsettling for the workforce as well, because many of them were moved out of their substantive roles. So we had staff from short breaks and the social work teams and the community access teams going to work in the children's homes. Some of them were helping the one-to-one work. So with people out of their comfort zone, it was also very resource intensive. So we had some 3-to-1 staffing in some of the packages that we had. There was also the stress making sure no one caught COVID or was worse off as a result of the service provision. And said my wife's a nurse. She caught COVID last November. I then caught COVID. And again, I was lucky. We weren't hospitalized. We didn't have breathing problems, but we were both knocked off our feet. I went from working around the clock to sleeping 15 hours a day. I was off work for 6 weeks. So, and I was one of the lucky ones. So the thought of one of these, immune suppressed children or getting COVID was a big worry, in these packages, because what we were doing hadn't been done before, certainly within the trust. I suppose getting back to the new normal was difficult too. There was that bit about then creating dependency, because what we found was a lot of our children liked the one-to-one packages. They were happy enough not playing with other children. They liked just that one-to-one. So getting back to the new normal actually sort of wasn't always that easy for them. Okay, Alison. Again, there were challenges, some challenges, not as much as we thought with PPE. Some of the more challenging children ripped off some of the PPE off the staff. There was no approved PPE mask that we could use with children who needed lip read. At one point, we were going to buy ones out of America. They were like 250 quid, crazy money. But again, they weren't approved to be even used. So we were sort of worried about using them. We used lanyards with a photo of the staff member when they were wearing a mask, particularly if those children with profound learning disabilities and autism, so they could see who it was. And again, we couldn't help everyone. We've over 600 families that we provide services for. So there was unmet need. It was that bit about, prioritizing, those most in need. And children were severely unregulated by the lack of school, the routine and social outlets. And we're still seeing some of the outworkings of that even now at the moment within, the service. Okay, Alison. There were also the challenges of working of a really vulnerable group. So like people had their normal stuff going on as well as COVID. So this particular individual, they'd lost their mother in the last 12 months. And then the father-in-law was terminally ill, as well as lockdown, as well as COVID, as well as having a child with disability, So the cumulative effect of that, is great. Child was constantly having meltdowns, would get extremely angry, hit out. So again, there was vulnerabilities within the homes. Mental health due to lockdown and homeschooling was deteriorating for the parent, the stress, the loneliness, high alert, at all time. So the risks were really high here. A lot of the time we work with a group of people who are sort of hanging on by their fingernails at the best of time. So thinking, right, where am I going to put the help? Where are we going to put the resources? Those were really critical decisions, to have to make. Okay, if you want to go to the next one. But what made it work? I suppose at the end of the day, we had trust with our staff. We trust with the providers, we had the trust of parents, we had the trust of the children. And that was really, really important. Particularly when you're redeploying people as well. We had a very established community development model, and that really helped us. That was one of our strengths. Again, the communication and this idea of equal partnership with the voluntary sector was really important. And, they knew it wasn't tokenistic, which is why, they bought into it, because, they could have just said, look, we're sorry, this is above our pay grade, this is too dangerous, we're not doing it. Again, these three teams, were moved about quite a bit, as well as the social work teams. That ability to be flexible and move quickly, and large bureaucratic organizations like trust aren't always very good at that. And certainly, social work and whatever is not always good at it either, but needs must is a great master. We really, really, had to do that, and I say everybody did pull together. The expertise of our clinical colleagues and allied health professionals was also important. I suppose this idea that it had to be safe, and that was a message that we embedded right through the system. And again, that was one of the reasons why people bought into it and went, but okay, Alison. And I suppose, what did we learn, and as I say, social work's not good at celebrating things, we're more likely to snigger, go, who do they think they are, whatever. But, what we do is important, and, what we do is valued, and it should be recognized and celebrated. And I say our clinical colleagues are so much better at this than we are. I think there's learning for us. There's always a focus on learning when things go wrong. I think we need to get better at focusing on learning when things, go right, and I think, we need to seriously look at that as a profession. Okay, Alison, you want to go on to the next one? And I suppose, what did we learn? Yep, every day is a school day. We were learning hour by hour, minute by minute, and leading from the front. And I suppose in terms of credibility, management needed to get their hands dirty. So, during this lockdown, our head of service, all of the 8 A's have done shifts within the children's homes when staffing has been low. And again, that has helped foster that idea of we are all in this together. We're not sitting up in our ivory towers expecting you to do the dirty work. And I suppose the other learning is we should have pride in social work and wider children's disability services as well. And again, sometimes we don't always see that. We're sort of seen as somewhere down the pecking order between, Gateway and Fit and maybe some of the other, teams. I suppose really, this is really important for me. The voluntary sector are not poor cousins in terms of service provision, because they were central in this. You know, they helped us make this work, you know. You know, and I suppose, you know, we really were thankful to them, and the assistant director did send them a letter, which was greatly appreciated too. The other thing I would say about learning is tell it from the heart, because I did put in that application for the HSJ award. I think it was 10 o'clock at night. I was tired. I didn't have an awful lot of time to spend on it, but I had all the work done with the project. So I just put it in, actually forgot about it, and we didn't know the months later that we'd actually been shortlisted. But when I was doing that, I just told it exactly like it was. I wasn't sugarcoating it or putting big words or anything in it. I just said what had happened and what we did. And that seemed to really grab actually the judges. But I think it's good learning generally, you know, within your work. Okay, Alison. And I suppose, what do we want to do next? You know, there's certainly interest regionally in adopting the model and this community development type approach, because people have seen how it can, you know, really work. We also were successful in winning a quality improvement award. So we got money that we're now using to employ new family support workers. So building on that idea of that one-to-one preventative type work. So they're going to do the crisis intervention element of the work. So those families on the edge of care, those ones where there's a, you know, that risk of breakdown. And the first one started with us now at the end of September. We'd like to disseminate the findings, I suppose, more. We'd like to develop new services, more tailored, flexible ways of working. I suppose that upskilling of the voluntary sector and increasing their confidence, you know, to deliver new services as well. You know, again, we want to build on that. And I suppose there are ongoing one-to-one packages. So we still have a small number of children, high priority children, that are on those one-to-one packages. But again, we've got the learning from that, you know, and I say we know that the ASD kids like that, and it works for them and it's effective. Okay, Alison. So I always like to end with a wee picture. So this is one of children enjoying our community events, and I think it's always important to remember that sort of human face of the whole thing. And I think we're on to questions now then, Alison. So
right, I'm just going to stop sharing, and you can pick up and see some faces now. So if you just want to, has anybody any questions for Mark? You can unmute and ask away, or feel free to use the chat. Very quiet bunch, Mark.
I know whole pile of them, and they're not that quiet usually.
I'd just like to say, Alison, so I'm Elaine and I'm Mark's head of service, so he'll be getting an extra paycheck there in a few annual leave days for his wonderful words. So I just can't underestimate the work that Mark and Kieran, who's also here today, have put in relation to this. And I mean, all our managers, it was extremely hard work. I had just come into the head of service post, I think, in the October time, and we got hit with COVID in March. So yeah, it was a bit of a learning curve. So I think the key thing that Mark probably has undersold himself is just the ability for him and the staff to think outside the box. And I think that was key, because the normal rules did not apply. And so I was delighted to be able to give permission to do that. I think that was key to it. As I say, I sat with the other heads of service from the other 4 trusts, and I'm happy, you know, we were happy to share. Equally, you know, any of the learning I have taken from them, we have tried to use. So it's been really positive that way. I think at the end of all, it has helped our children and our families, and that's the key to it. Everybody that's sitting around here knows the same thing. That's what people want to do. That's what you come into the job to do. And sometimes that's really difficult, you know, the bureaucracy around social work at times, but it just shows you what you can do. And to be fair, you know, we had the backings of our assistant director and our director who were really, really supportive. I think that's key as well. So yeah, and I do know that I did know the answer, Mark, to all of those car questions, but I just didn't want to look like a smart person and tell them all. So because I hear it often in supervision about his new car, so that's how I knew what it was. But yeah, no, thank you, and thanks to all of the Children's Disability Team in the Sunrise. I'm very lucky as a head of service. It makes me look great. They're all really hard workers. So
Thank you. Mark, I think Joanne Sweeney has a wee question for you.
Hello. Thanks. First of all, I apologise because my washing machine's on the spin cycle and it's really noisy. So apologies if you could hear that. Really interesting presentation, and thanks, Mark. I'm the family support manager in Medcap, and we also had experience of being creative around an emergency service, working with the Belfast Trust. And it was really, the impact's really evident. And I'm just wondering, did you use any specific evaluation tools to measure the impact of the work?
No, we just very much used a qualitative method, you know, with interviews and questionnaires. So there wasn't a specific approach. And it would really, the idea was just to gather as much information as we could and then put it into themes and stuff. So no, we didn't do anything particularly clever, but I think you can see from the quality of the responses that we had very, you know, open and honest, you know, feedback.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's very, very powerful stuff. Thank you.
Anne has her hand up, so she has. Unmute.
Yep. Well, hello, Mark.
Hello, Anne. How are you?
Oh, not too bad. Mark, I suppose it's two questions I have, and it's more about looking into the future. I'm a member of the Southern Protect Life Forum, which I don't know whether you heard of, but it is looking at suicide and mental health. And this morning we were actually talking about the number of people with autism, particularly young people who have mental health problems and depression. And it has risen sharply during COVID because they haven't met their friends. They're on maybe gaming for long periods, not sleeping, not eating properly. And that anxiety and mental health in young people has risen sharply. There was actually one lady on whose son took his life recently, and it was really heartbreaking to listen to her story. So that's one area there's a rise in. The other rise we're seeing, because I work with the younger children in Sure Start, is the amount of children coming through with autism. It's rising all the time. So I suppose from what I'm trying to say is, as service users, what can we do given that money's going to be tighter? There's going to be increased numbers of service users. We need to work wiser with what we've got. And I'm just wondering if you've any tips or suggestions for us as a group, how we can do that.
I think people power is the key. The last PPA meeting I had 2 parents turned up, but there was a parent in the Portadown area organised an event by themselves. And I think they had 16 or 18 agency stalls and quite a big turnout. So I think if parents can get together, that's a really big thing and driving it forward. And then rather than us doing it and then parents jumping on, have it the other way around, you know. Also, as a result of this, we started a project called Changing Lives and Changing Times with Cedar. And that was specifically to do with the mental health element of this. So it's young people with autism without a learning disability, because just what you have said, you know, we recognized from the evaluations the impact of mental health. So we've tried to do something about that. Again, it's a drop in the ocean. But again, you know, in children's disability, we are trying to cover so many bases. There is no other service within corporate parenting, which is such a wide remit as we have. So Elaine keeps telling me that she has to do an awful lot of work on whatever. But we'll have the residential, we'll have the services, we'll have the teams with the short breaks fostering team, with community access, with transition. You know, it's really broad. So I would say parent power, you know, if people have good ideas, come to us.
Yeah. One of the things the parent this morning, in fact, there was a few parents there, said that because of their caring duties, their network is very, very small. So they tend to, if they have problems, either go to their school or their GP, and they're just finding that both of those don't know about all the voluntary organisations and all the other programmes and things that's out there. So I don't know if that's something down the line that could be worked on. you
Yeah,
know,
it's a problem. It's that problem in terms of raising expectations. It's capacity versus demand. So it goes
Yeah.
back to what I was saying in the earlier slides. It's having to prioritize those most in need whilst trying to build in some preventative type elements elsewhere. But I say we've over 600 families, and you know, and particularly now post-COVID, well, still COVID, the amount of children that we can get into program now is still greatly reduced to what it was before. And again, all the COVID money has stopped. So there's only so much we can do. So I suppose we need the voluntary sector, we need parents, we need everybody to be coming up with innovative ideas about how we can do this, you know, and is there expertise or things that we can do? We may not have the money, we may not have the service, but is there other things that can be done, you know? And I think, as Elaine said, it's about thinking outside the box. You know, I think it's the only way to deal with.
And I think the bit you said about coming out of silos was bang on. You know, it is about networking and working together. Your presentation was very good, Mark, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you like the cars, did Jan?
No, they wouldn't be my type of cars. I love cars, but I don't like those type of cars. No, I think that might be a midlife crisis, Mark, but I'm saying nothing.
It's been going on for a long time.
Can I just jump into Lan there, just a wee bit else? So I, as the head of service, I sit in what we call our Southern Outcomes Group, and that's where all the voluntary and the trust and, you know, the councils and education and probation all sit on that. And I think the key message that I have been saying, you know, and I'm sure they're sick of me saying it for a month in and month out, is the trust can't do it all, or one organisation can't do it all. It's about building those networks. And that's what Mark means about, you know, the community development bit of it.
Yeah.
You know, we did do a bit of work, and I'm sure Mark said about our journey through disability, and what families were saying was that even if there was an A to Z of services, that they could locate themselves rather than always having to come through for somebody else to do it for you. So I think that's key, that you know, because what happens to parents is sometimes they, as you say, they go to GP or they go to somebody and they say, no, we don't do that, try somebody else. And you could be around 5, 6, 7 organizations before, you know, it's very frustrating for parents. So it's trying to, I suppose, to have that joined up thinking on. And I think probably the Sun Trust we're not bad at that. Our community developments, you know, we put a lot of time and money and effort into it, but we're not arrogant enough to think that we can do that on our own, because we can't. As very much a joined up. And if you can make those links and get one person in an organization interested in that, and you get their name like mine, everybody's got mine, then you get inundated, but at least you get some action out of that. And so that would be my advice to you.
Okay, thank you.
Liz did have her hand up, but I don't know, Liz, do you still have a wee question?
No, do you know what? I didn't have a question, but I just wanted to say, and it's like Anne, I think Anne's already said it, so like really, really good presentation. And what I really enjoyed is that I think, you know, if you listen to Radio Ulster, all you hear is like very negative stories and a lot of negative stuff about how, you know, about your carers, about working with individuals. So it's just really, really good to hear something that's been so proactive and something that has obviously had very, very positive outcomes. So so like I say, not a question, but just really, really enjoyed listening to that.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Anyone else? No.
I was just going to say to Mark there about the midlife crisis. I've just remembered I've pink hair, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut in future because I know better. So you're okay.
Well, if nobody else has any questions, I'd like to thank Mark for today. I thought it was a very good presentation, and I look forward to him sending me a wee request to do another one when he has a wee subject to talk about next year. So I look forward to that. We have recorded it and we will edit it down, and when we have it available on the website, we will send you all a link. So all I have to say is thank you very much for attending, and please look out for future seminars. They're all on the website. Thank you.